log in, but I'll get started. Good morning, everyone online. I'm Janelle McCoy with the Mid-Atlantic Geospatial Users Group, and I'd like to welcome you to the webinar entitled Web Application Support for Land Use Planning and Management for a State Transportation Agency. Thank you for being with us today. Just some short announcements before we get started. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available at the MAGTUG WordPress.com website shortly after today's live broadcast. Please visit our website for more geospatial goodness in upcoming events like the MAC-URISA 2016 being held Wednesday, October 12th through Friday, October 14th in Atlantic City, New Jersey. The New Jersey Geospatial Forum is holding its quarterly meeting on the final day of this conference, and the forum is free to everyone to attend. Please also mark your calendars for the GIS Day festivities on Wednesday, November 2nd, being held at the Rowan College at Burlington County in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, when MAGTUG joins the college and Burlington County's Department of GIS to put on an exciting and informative day of presentations. MAGTUG's theme this year will be modeling infrastructure in 3D with seminars on three-dimensional data collection from drone-captured imagery to managing ground, mobile, and aerial LiDAR, and a review of 3D desktop applications. We ask you to participate in today's webinar by typing questions that spring to mind throughout the webinar into the chat box or the Q&A box on the bottom right of the WebEx screen. I or my co-host, Bob Pliska, will read back your questions at the end of the webinar so that everyone has the opportunity to hear the questions from our presenter, the answers from our presenter. Sorry. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Dave Braig, GIS Project Manager for the JMT Technology Group. JMT is a progressive geospatial information technology services provider specializing in transportation application solutions and is proud to call the Mid-Atlantic its home. We also thank JMT for the use of its WebEx account today. Dave will be walking us through the Delaware Department of Transportation's web-based planning review system. Using GIS, the department has streamlined its process of reviewing and approving subdivision street plans and new commercial entrance submissions. Dave, the virtual floor is yours.
Thanks, Janelle. Good morning, everybody. As Janelle mentioned, my name is David Braig. I am a GIS project manager with JMT, and I've been working with DelDOT since joining JMT about 3 years ago. We're going to talk a little bit this morning about an application we've been working on with them for quite some time called the PDCA. It's not Plan, Do, Check, Act, which sometimes is a term that we see a lot inside of project management, but it's a planning, development, coordination application. This morning I'm just going to give you a quick overview of DelDOT's review process and where the PDCA fits into that, a little bit of overview of the actual term capabilities of the application, and we're under development and getting ready to release some updated capabilities, and I wanted to showcase some of those as well this morning. JMT has been working directly with DelDOT, the Plan Review Division, DelDOT in general for quite some time, but the Plan Review Division for well over 7 years, providing direct plan review support services. So JMT has folks on site sitting at DelDOT working on some of these reviews, as well as providing technology support that we've been providing for the PDCA. When we started this process, JMT and DelDOT started to look at the business processes and the review processes around what DelDOT was doing for the plan reviews. And we ended up developing something called the PDCA, the Planning Development Coordination Application, in an effort to streamline the review processes, consolidate the data into a single location, and provide a little bit of GIS capabilities at the time. The overall goal was moving from managing disparate data tracking, paper documents, Excel, Word documents, letters that were sent out into an efficient system, a single point of contact inside of DelDOT. Just a little bit of a background here on DelDOT's plan review process here. So the plan review division, basically all land development subdivision that impact the transportation system within inside of Delaware have to go through this review process. DelDOT's responsible for assessing the impacts of these improvements, making sure that entrances to DelDOT state-maintained roads, intersections, things like that are developed safely, efficiently, and to the standards of the state. The actual review process itself, this is a screenshot from DelDOT's website, and I'll step a little bit through some of the steps here. So it starts at the concept plan. So this is basically the development of a plan drawing that shows the details of the project and serves as the basis for discussion with DelDOT, what the engineers are going to develop and ultimately submit to DelDOT for review. After that, that plan is created, there's an optional pre-submittal meeting. So if the development project exceeds 200 vehicles per day, a plot meeting, a pre-submittal meeting is held with DelDOT to review the project for safety and potential additional improvements prior to the developers and the engineers proceeding with the additional investments of time and money on the project. So they're outlining what needs to happen. Are there major impacts? Do we need to start looking at additional things prior to actually planning and going forward with this project? In some instances, there's a traffic impact study required. For many projects, a study on the impact of the increased traffic flow as a result of the development project is required. A TIS could take anywhere from 4 to 6 months to complete, and it can be done either by consulting engineers or DelDOT themselves can provide traffic impact study review services as well. Once those pre-submittal actions are taken, there's an actual electronic submittal. The plan documents are provided to DelDOT in digital form by uploading them now through the PDCA. Any required fees are also paid online prior submittal to DelDOT, all through the PDCA itself. And what that does is that now transfers all of those plan documents into DelDOT's hands to support their review process. DelDOT reviews the subdivision and land development plans in all 3 counties and select municipalities, and they're basically ensuring that all the streets within the project or entrances that will be state maintained are going to meet the state standards. So there's an initial review from there. There's also a peer review. DelDOT's plan review process includes a peer review of other sections of DelDOT within defined review schedules. So there's set schedules. There's 2 review periods each month that are initiated for each of the 3 counties within of Delaware. The review cycle is dependent upon when the plan is submitted, and the reviewers that are assigned to that review cycle are dependent upon the location of the project. Ultimately, this leads to a final approval, a final disposition of the project, where DelDOT submits comment or approval letters for the actual construction of the project, and the project can proceed forward with any additional requirements or any additional permitting that's required outside of the DelDOT. Right now, the way this entire review process stands, the PDCA is helping manage the electronic submittal, the subdivision plans, and the final approval, and I'll showcase each one of those a little bit as we go forward here. Engineers can upload documents directly to DelDOT. There's information about the review process that's stored within inside of the PDCA, and the PDCA is automatically generating a lot of letters that are generated for approval or additional comments and follow-on work for the engineers. Within inside of DelDOT, the review process is divided up into specific areas of responsibility. So the state has 3 county review coordinators and 6 reviewers. There's 2 for each county. And each one of these reviewers are responsible for coordinating and performing the review of the development project. The specific reviewer obviously is determined by the location of the project, and the introduction of GIS was inside of PDCA here. At project creation, we're determining who the reviewers are, who are the people assigned to this particular project. So when we first started the PDCA, there was definitely a business process. The review process was in need of a change and an upgrade. It was primarily a paper process. It was paper intensive. Hard copy plan documents were mailed to DelDOT. Paper checks were mailed to DelDOT for all the various fees that are associated with it. Project tracking was somewhat standardized, but each of the review coordinators had their own take on what they wanted and what they felt was important for tracking the reviews of the projects that are moving through their particular area. And then all of the approval and comment letters were manually generated. The initial PDCA releases helped streamline this process. So we started to bring the project information into a centralized location, accessible to all the reviewers. Project details such as the project name, developer, engineer, the reviewer status, ADT information, were all made accessible through a single interface. And additional items such as offsite improvements, review checklists, and reporting capabilities were added along the way. And then in addition to this, the PDCA started to introduce GIS to the actual review process. So as being a GIS-based company and a GIS background, all of the development activities have a where, right? So the identification, development, redevelopment project is inherently spatial in nature. So the development activities are based on parcels. Each of the projects are based on basically one or more parcels make up a particular project. Smaller projects might have a single parcel being divided up for a family is splitting up a farm, or a parcel is being reused for a similar purpose. Larger subdivisions, such as the one in the screenshot here, are made up of hundreds of parcels being associated with a single project. We can add all this information to the map display, and prior to the PDCA, DelDOT didn't have a way of spatially visualizing all the projects and the relationships between all the projects that are coming into their section for review. So all the projects that are created inside of DelDOT for the review process are entered into the PDCA. There's specific information for each of the projects, so it allows for a single comprehensive view of the development activities across the state. So all of the projects for the state are entered inside the PDCA. Project relationships become clearly visible when viewed inside of a map display, so I can see related projects, projects that are near each other, and we start to introduce concepts of offsite improvements, shared roadways. If a new traffic signal has to go in, are there other projects near that traffic signal that could potentially share the cost of the development of that, or the development of that traffic signal. Reporting is also more efficient. We're storing content inside of a database. We can pull specific information out of there to generate reports for each of the users as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop into a quick demo. So this is, I've logged into the PDCA. We have a really basic search filter in here that lists a series of projects. In this case here, it's only listing out the projects that have the name Bayberry. So you'd see a list of projects, parcel numbers, the engineers, the internal reviewers, and I can take a look at the information for this particular project. We'll look at this one, the Village of Bayberry South. So inside this is the general page that is general information page for each of the projects inside of the PDCA. So we have some basic information at the top up here, such as the project name, the engineer, organization, the developer organization, a point of contact, who the internal reviewer is at this point, the type of project, is it a residential, a commercial, or a mixed use, its overall status, a couple indications of final acceptance. Is the project inactive? The file scanned to G drive is a network location. As DelDOT receives electronic plans, they move the content right now up to a network location so that other folks can have access to that data. And this is one of the pieces that we're trying to streamline with our current development efforts. In addition to that general information, we get some specific information about the location of the project, the county, as well as a list of all the parcels associated with this project, overall site acreage. There's information about the frontage roads. These are the roads that are state maintained that could have an impact or could be impacted by this development effort. And then we have additional information. ADT is average daily traffic. So these are average daily traffic counts to help determine traffic impact study, CIS and COAs for this particular project. So as with inside of the PDCA, we can add multiple unit types. So in this case here, it's a suburban zone project. There's 389 units of senior housing detached type of buildings. So these are ITE codes. And depending upon the values, the units, the PDCA will actually calculate the ADT, both AM, PM, and then Saturday travel, peak volume travel. All that information rolls up into a total ADT summary for this particular project. That information becomes more important when we look at offsite improvements and some of the other things where we can determine contribution to offsite improvements based upon the average daily traffic count. As you can see here, there's several unit types for this particular project. A listing with some approval dates, attachments, and then a series of letters down here. The project letters are the points of contact are added to it, the project information, project location. Based upon the review type, a correct template is selected by the PDCA and automatically generated. So that we have our map display. So the PDCA, we look at this particular project. The map display is showing our particular project, where it's located at, as well as information. I can see other projects that are around it. I can see in here as well, we can see offsite improvements as far as traffic signals and intersections. So we can look at related projects within the map display. So I have a particular project selected here. I can locate related projects associated with that. So in this case here, it found 8 offsite improvements and 4 roadway improvements associated with this particular project. So I can cycle through those. In addition, I can look at some additional details about the actual Village of Bayberry South Phase 7. I could update the boundary. I could add additional parcels if I wanted to. So the map display provides, at the time, it was a unique view for the DelDOT reviewers. They hadn't been able to see the project and its relationship to the other development projects that are going on, as well as some of the offsite improvements that are being required, and relating all of those things spatially back to one or more projects. So I mentioned inside the PDCA, we have the ability to track offsite improvements. So an offsite improvement is basically comprised of a series of one of these things, an entrance, an intersection, interchanges, roundabouts, railroad crossings, or traffic signals. And they may need to be updated or they're impacted by a development. So you can imagine a large subdivision goes into what used to be a rural farming community, and there's 300 units being added to that subdivision. Traffic is going to be impacted, so there's additional entrances. There's going to be additional signals There might be left turn lanes that are added. There might be a need for an improved railroad crossing if there's a railroad crossing near the project. So all of those things are considered offsite improvements, and they can be related to a project or multiple projects. And we can capture them within inside of the PDCA. So we can relate them, as I mentioned, to one or more projects. And what this does is it allows support for planning the cost for planning the development cost for the particular offsite improvement. So if we look at the screenshot over here, I've got an intersection improvement for this particular project. And using the ADT, the average daily traffic volume values that I had showed previously, we can go through and we can determine the developer share contribution to the total cost. So in this case here, an intersection has an estimated cost. We can break that cost down based upon the number of projects that are impacting or are going to use that intersection, as well as the traffic that's going to go through that intersection. So the higher the impact of the ADT, the more the developer will contribute to it. So it's a cost-sharing capability that we can track with inside of the PDCA. So we can add new offsite improvements based upon the plan review process, and then tie those offsite improvements to specific projects, and then track those offsite improvements in conjunction with the projects as they go through the review process and through complete construction. In addition to the offsite improvements, we have the ability to look for frontage roads. So frontage roads, using simple GIS, we can enter in a buffer distance around a particular project and locate all of the state maintained roads within inside of that project, within inside that buffer distance related to that project. And we can look at, we can associate those as frontage roads to the project and go through the development of that. We can also add additional layers to the map display. So we've been able to add development zones, restricted spaces, byways and bike paths. And since on the back end of the PDCA, it's an ArcGIS server, is serving up all of these, the map services, that information can be shared to other organizations and groups within inside of DelDOT and across the state. We're currently working with DelDOT to share that into their Inform 2.0, as well as the First Map services that the state of Delaware is offering. So that information will soon be accessible through that. And we're starting to consume First Map services within inside of PDCA as well. So we'll be able to take all of the state maintained data that's publicly accessible and view that within inside of the PDCA application. Back over to the PDCA here. So we have our project that we were looking at here. Let me go ahead and select our project. So with this, I can see the frontage roads that are associated with this particular project. There's 3 of them listed within inside of here. So those frontage roads are now associated with that project. If there's any development activities that are along those frontage roads, we can track that information. Let me show you the offsite improvements. I apologize for the lag between VPN and WebEx. We can look at in this case here, we're looking at a particular project. There's our offsite improvements that are associated with that particular project. So there's a whole host of them in here. And then each one of the offsite improvements in here, we can zoom to those so we can navigate through those and take a look at those. It'll send in the map display around them. In this case here, back to our original Bayberry South Phase 7, we see the same information that we saw with inside of the general information page. We see the type of units. So these are the units that were driving the ADT information associated with this project. And then I've got the ability here to look at all of the offsite improvements that are related to this particular project. We can export this content out to KML, which is at the time was valuable, but now it's a little less so. But we can still export that out to KML and share that across. We can generate project reports, offsite improvement reports, add additional offsite improvements to this particular project. So all of this information is displayed within inside of this common map format. In addition to being able to view existing projects, DelDOT employees can actually go in and create new projects within inside of this map display as well. So they can define a project boundary by selecting and adding parcels to that, and then go through the process of adding any frontage roads, intersections, and things like that as well. The table down the bottom, again, is just going to allow me to, I can search for related projects. I can see additional information down here with each one of the offsite improvements. I can zoom to it. Again, I can find other related projects, so you can trickle down and not only select the offsite improvement, but then find the projects that are associated with that offsite improvement. In addition to being able to view the content here, go back, my project. We have the ADT information that I showed, and I can view directly the offsite improvements associated with this particular project. So again, the same information I saw on the map, I can view within inside of a list view here, and I can take a look at one of these. So in this case here, the offsite improvement gives me a little bit of description. I can select the type of offsite improvement, the location if I wanted to. If I added it by the map, that's automatically going to be displayed. There's 2 projects associated with that, so I can assign additional projects to that list, and I can select a lead for that, and then I can determine the developer share contribution to that as well to help with cost tracking. And if there's an estimated cost associated with that, the breakdown for each of the projects will be determined based upon the option that I select up here for the developer share. In addition to the projects and the offsite improvements, we also have the ability for, within inside of PDCA, is adding comments and checklists, and there's also reporting capabilities as well within inside of the PDCA, so we can generate standard reports that DelDOT is using to report the progress of the review process as well as information about specific projects. As I mentioned at the beginning, PDCA has been around for quite some time, and as you can see in some of the in the demo here, some of the technology is a little older, so the Flash application and some of the UI pieces. So it's been continually evolving since our initial release. Last summer, PDCA was moved up to a commercial cloud-hosted solution. We're using Microsoft Azure now. That had been hosted by JMP and hosted internally to DelDOT, and then eventually we moved it up to Azure, which has been nice because it allows, one, it allows JMP, allows us to apply updates as needed. It reduces the cost, the management cost to DelDOT for hosting the PDCA. The cost that their state IT group was charging them were considerably higher than the cost of the Microsoft Azure solution. In addition, the PDCA now supports electronic plan submission. So up until last summer, DelDOT was still taking paper plan documents and having engineers submit copies of paper plan documents, and some of these are 200-300-page PDF plan documents that were being sent to DelDOT for a review, as well as paper checks mailed into them. So we're now collecting online payments. So a lot of that lift happened last summer to put those 2 pieces in place. And currently what we're working on right now is the incorporation of electronic plan review and process tracking. So right now it's being handled by SharePoint and some Excel files. So there's three main pieces that are helping DelDOT through the review process, the PDCA, SharePoint, and Excel. And we're trying to streamline those underneath of a single umbrella, that being the PDCA. And we're also beginning to incorporate a lot of the FirstMap data content. For those of you who aren't aware, the FirstMap is a statewide repository for GIS services that they update on a monthly basis. They have both straight GIS REST services that you can integrate with. They also have an open data portal where you can grab and download content as well. So the DelDOT's customers can now view and access the PDCA directly. So pdca.deldot.gov is a publicly accessible URL. Engineers, developers can log into that application and see the projects associated with their particular organization. They're also now required to enter new projects into this application. So they classify a project based upon a series of questions during the creation process. And then once they've identified the type of project, they have to select the location of the project. So they do that interactively through a map or by selecting one or more parcel numbers. If they have a list of them, they want to copy paste them over. And then those properties, those parcels get associated with a single project. And the PDCA project is created from that. Once a PDCA project is created, developers can upload their plans. So they can take the plan documents that they have, create a PDF of those plan documents, and then upload them directly to the PDCA. Once they're uploaded, DelDOT has the ability to view and download that content. They can also, the engineers and developers can also submit online payments. So the PDCA integrates with the state's online payment processing vendor, Velocity, and we can calculate some payments and then go off and actually allow the engineers and developers to submit those payments, again, reducing the paper check process and some of the delays in getting the required fees submitted that potentially held up review processes, the review of plans that have been submitted. Engineers and developers can also request pre-submittal meetings with DelDOT. There's an ability to have the plans, the project created, the plans uploaded, and then request a meeting with DelDOT before they go any further to identify any problems with inside of the plan, specific things, highlight stormwater areas, some specific safety concerns that may exist for that particular project. So prior to this, all of these things were done manually. As I mentioned, the plans and checks were mailed. The meeting requests were emailed in to one or more people and trying to coordinate that. So they're able to streamline that process. Right now, we're averaging about 150 to 170 projects submitted each month to DelDOT through the PDCA. That's a wide range of projects. There's minor projects, which are simple lot line adjustments, up to major subdivision projects. So there's a fairly wide range of them, but it's been pretty steady at about 150 to 170 submittals each month. A quick view. So we've been looking at this case here, our Bayberry South, the Village of Bayberry South Phase 7 project. And I'm going to switch browsers here to Firefox. And this is the external PDCA here. The external PDCA right now, I'm logged in with an account that's associated with the developer for this particular Village of Bayberry project. So I can see all of the projects that are associated with my developer organization. So there's several in here. But this is the Village of Bayberry South Phase 7 that we have been looking at on the internal PDCA. And I can view information associated with this one. And this is going to show me the same basic information that I saw on the internal. WebEx and VPN refresh, there we go. There's the project name, the location, the project type, as well as the developer and engineering organizations. These can be changed. So if the developer comes in A lot of the projects have long life cycles, so this one was probably originally submitted back in 2012, 2013 timeframe. And maybe the developer is still interested, but the engineer is not going to be working with that. The developer can log in and actually change the engineering organization associated with the project, as well as the point of contact at that engineering organization. We can see the parcels associated with this one. So I believe this one has about 900 parcels associated with it, with this large subdivision. We can request a meeting. So the request a meeting form comes up, and there's some additional information that has to get submitted. That generates a notification that gets sent to DelDOT saying that there's a meeting being requested for this particular project. The project information is included in that meeting request, and then DelDOT can go ahead and schedule that meeting on their calendars. In addition, the developers can upload documents, so they can add attachments. This is where they would upload particular plan documents for this project, and these are immediately accessible by DelDOT. So the submittal process now has become, there's set dates within inside of the review process that DelDOT has. So there's a lot of submittals right before that due date, and people can now just simply upload the content and submit the project for review. I mentioned there's the fees, so there's fees that can be collected here: initial stage fee, construction fee, area-wide study fee, as well as a shared use path fee added to this particular project. And you can calculate the values, the amount for that, and then go off and actually submit payment for that. So this allows for streamlining that. No more paper documents, online payments, all of that stuff is done electronically now and submitted directly to DelDOT. So what we're working on now, as the PDCA continues to grow and expand, is we're taking the current PDCA capabilities and we're enhancing them to support review, project creation, and management, as well as the review process, the internal workflow management. So as I mentioned back at the beginning, right now the review process within inside of DelDOT is a three-headed beast. There's PDCA, there's SharePoint, and there's a bunch of Microsoft Excel files. So with this effort that we're under right now, the SharePoint process manages the internal review process and the assignment of tasks out to reviewers. So we're bringing that within inside of the PDCA. And the Excel spreadsheet is basically project tracking information. So we're incorporating that within inside of the PDCA so that it will all live under a single umbrella. So now, from an external user point of view, they can still do the same thing that they've been doing before: log in, select their project, submit the projects for review. There's an additional step where they have to select the type of review that they're submitting it for. So before it was just, here's my project, I want to review it. Now we've got to, the engineers have to say, this is for a commercial entrance plan review, or this is for a subdivision street review, and identify that from the start so that DelDOT can then manage that process. With inside of PDCA, we're taking the electronic plan review process. There's no more documents are uploaded to the cloud from the engineer. All those documents are accessible to all the DelDOT staff as well as the peer reviewers. So I highlighted that one component where there was a file scanned to G Drive where documents had to be scanned and brought down to a network location. With the new PDCA, that's getting removed, and all of the content lives within inside of the cloud. So now there's no more downloading and moving content around. It's all at one centralized location. What that is also allowing us to do is we can integrate with Bluebeam software. So there's a Bluebeam Studio, and the developer or the reviewers are going to use Bluebeam Review and as well as View, the free viewer. And the Bluebeam software allows for a plan review, electronic plan review. The Studio software allows for a collaboration. So there's basically a studio session is set up. The PDCA copies the plan review document to that studio session and lets people know that the document is up there for review. Peer reviewers can go in and add comments. see each other's comments within inside of that collaboration space. And then when that peer review process is completed, a review coordinator can close that session, consolidate all of those comments into a single PDF document, export those comments out to an Excel spreadsheet, and associate that information with the project and send that information through the PDCA back to the engineers and developers. There's also some updated reporting and tracking because we're getting a little bit more fine-grained with the review process and what we're looking at. We have the ability to do some advanced reporting and reporting out time frames, how long was a project submitted, sat in DelDOT's hands for how many days, if they requested more information, it went back to the engineers, how long did it sit in their hands. We have a lot more finer grained tracking capabilities just inherently within inside of the application than we did with manually entering stuff inside of an Excel spreadsheet. So if we go back to that 7-step plan review process where previously the PDCA was looking at just electronic submittals, subdivision plans, and final approval, what the new PDCA, the update that we're working on now, which will be out by the end of the year, encompasses the pre-submittal meeting, the electronic submittal, the subdivision plan, the actual plan review process, and the final approvals as well. So we're taking what we've had already and we're just adding additional capabilities to that. Eventually, we'll integrate the traffic impact study, the TIS and the TOA. Right now, within inside of DelDOT, that content is managed by a different group. We have to get them on board with using the PDCA and getting them exposure to that before we can incorporate the TIS information within inside of the PDCA fully and completely. For the PDCA itself, the benefits, so the review process is definitely much more standardized and consistent. People are entering in the project into that centralized location. There's standard information. Information is required. You can't put half of the information into a particular project before it can be created. So there's a lot of checks and balances in that sense. There's definitely improved customer service. So there's notifications if a project is submitted. The customer, in this case the engineers or developers, are notified that the project has been submitted. They have a date. They know what review cycle it's going in. They have the ability to upload documents very quickly. They can also do the payment processing portion of it as well to avoid any lags or any holdups with the review process depending upon the fees being paid. The reduced timelines for the review processes, again, because we're eliminating the paper trail of actually mailing in the document or a CD with the document in multiple copies. And that would take 2 days to get from the front desk of DelDOT back to the review section once that was mailed in. So we've kind of eliminated that. We have the efficient collection of the development fees, as I mentioned, and then the improved transparency. So with the GIS content, we can publish that content out. It's all publicly accessible information. There's nothing that's proprietary or secretive in the data that's being collected as part of the PDCA. So that content can be shared out with the general public. And then with some of the reporting capabilities that are being added into it, again, a little bit more transparency on the status of the review process, where it's at, whose hands is it in, and that helps not only DelDOT and the engineers, the review division within inside of DelDOT and the engineers, but also DelDOT management as a whole. They can take a look at where particular projects are within inside the review process, especially if they have questions coming from the constituents, engineers or developers asking about projects. They'll be able to quickly look at the reports that are generated by the PDCA to determine the status of the project. I think that's all I had as far as the PDCA goes. So I guess Janelle, Bob will probably just, if there's any questions that came in, or if there's any questions right now that we want to field and entertain, I'd be happy to answer questions as I could. If you don't have any questions now or something comes up later, my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to me through email or phone and give a call if you've got a question about some of the work that we've done here.
Thank you very much, Dave. If everybody has been so glued to their computer screens they haven't had a chance to type in questions, now is your time to go ahead and do that through the Q&A box or through the chat, either way. Dave, that was a really a thorough work process. How long a process did it take for you to develop this? I mean, was this more than a year-long process, or I know that it's still in development, but now that you have, I know, and it's specific to Delaware, how easily would this be something that could be repurposed for other government agencies, other transportation agencies?
Gotcha. That's a great question to know. So the actual PDCA is kind of grown organically over a number of years with little bits in here and there. Over the last 2.5 years or so, we've tried to streamline that and kind of componentize it and modernize it a little bit. Specific to some of the recent efforts with inside of DelDOT, we typically look at about a 6-month turnaround for some of the additional capabilities that have been added. In general, 6 to 8 months to build out some of the new functionality that they've requested to build into it.
Okay.
The actual components themselves and the framework itself is something that could be picked up and used for other agencies, and the integration points with Bluebeam and the ESRI stuff is all things that we've now gained a lot of experience on. So whether or not the code can transfer, the knowledge can transfer to support future integrations.
Oh, that's good to hear. We do have a question from the audience. Are you entering in past applications, and how is that being done? So for the Delaware, are they going back? Are they, adding stuff into their history so that it's available there?
So the PDCA, the current version of the PDCA that is sitting there being used by DelDOT has got all of the projects from the beginning of time as far as the PDCA is concerned. That's one of the items that we're actually looking at for the new PDCA is how much of that information should get brought into the new structure and moved out to the Azure. They have some projects that have been sitting there for 7-8 years and they've just gone inactive. DelDOT obviously doesn't want to remove that legacy information. We'll probably retain that outside of the PDCA and move the active projects over to the new PDCA. And then if some of the inactive projects come in, then we can bring those over to into the newer version of the PDCA once that's up and running later this year.
Oh, okay. So this couldn't be used to go back in time to look at things before PDCA was invented.
Yeah.
Those type of submissions.
They would, yeah, correct. So unless the project was explicitly created in the PDCA, we wouldn't be able to go back and look in time at those things. We have to know what box, in what cabinet, and what closet that the documents were.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I think that's something that all government agencies still have as a, process of finding things from the way back days.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that was the only question anybody had. So thank you very much for your time this morning. Again, your contact information is there for other people to give you a call or shout out through email if they have any further questions. But I would like to thank you and JMT Technology Group for doing this webinar today. I hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar and will join us on Tuesday, December 6th for our next webinar on cloud implementation or integration of government practices, which will be presented by the Weston Solutions. Unless you have any last remarks, Dave, we'll end this webinar and everybody can resume their day.
No, thanks, Janelle, for the time, and thanks everybody for taking the time out this morning to listen. I hope you found good information in there, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Have a happy, everybody have a geospatial happy mapping day, and join us again at the either GIS Day or down at Atlantic City for the MAGTUG conference. Thank you. Goodbye.